opportunity, please come visit us. An Energy Blockchain Consortium is actually looking forward to hopefully working with IEEMA members, or at least having some type of a relationship, and we can definitely explore that. So my background is that I have about 25 years in IT. Last 13 of these years were in the utilities, smart grid, and now the energy blockchain space. I'm actually from New Delhi. I was born and raised in New Delhi. I come from Delhi College of Engineering a long time ago. Then I went to Massachusetts and got my master's in UMass. And over the last many years, I've had an opportunity to work with the MIT labs in developing some supercomputers, and I've also worked on developing distributed computing platforms, many different transaction processing applications, scalable MPP machines. I also founded about 3 companies, and I have been very close to the Department of Energy, and I have been a board member of the Gridwise Architecture Council, a board member of National Institute of Standards and Technology, and a few other organizations. I'm also a member today of the Department of Energy's evaluation committee that evaluates grants for startups. So that's my background. I am very fortunate to be in front of you. I do want to talk about 4 things today in terms of the topic. And then I also would like to have a Q&A session, if that's possible. So in terms of the topics, I'll give you a quick introduction about who Energy Blockchain is, who Energy Blockchain Consortium is, what we are doing. Then I'll give you an introduction to blockchain. Many of you actually might know about blockchain really well. Some of you may be hearing it for the first time. And I'll try to demystify blockchain and go beyond the hype. Then I'll talk about a few use cases for the utilities industry, and also a few use cases for equipment manufacturers, or specifically the power equipment manufacturers, because they are also key beneficiaries of this technology. So let's start with the introduction to my organization. Is called Energy Blockchain Consortium. The mission of my organization is to identify and solve some of the compelling problems in this industry, in this energy industry. So not just use blockchain for the sake of it, but really identify real problems that can be solved using blockchain. So our vision is that we are considering blockchain as an enabling technology, a technology that allows for developing the transformation that is taking place over the last 5-10 years with smart grid and other type of changes in our industry. So what we are doing as a consortium is that we are trying to educate the market, and we are actually developing use cases with a number of players in the industry, including the Department of Energy. We are developing interoperability standards because the future of blockchain cannot be hostage to one product or one technology. It must have interoperability built into it. And then our organization is also getting involved in pilot projects, which are early stages of implementation using blockchain to solve these problems. Our company was actually founded last year. It's a nonprofit, Florida headquartered company. The interesting thing about our organization is that we are not tied into a particular blockchain or a technology. So we are very vendor agnostic, product agnostic. The organization has now chapters in Canada, Singapore, Brazil, and we are also building some tie-up in Delhi as well. We are not a consulting company. This is purely a member-driven nonprofit organization. Just quickly, these are the things that our organization is working on: education, use cases, interoperability standards, and pilots. We also have an accelerator program, which the utilities and these organizations are using as a way to really understand what blockchain is. Who are our members? Our members are utilities, munis, co-ops, ISOs, RTOs, also the state and the federal agencies, and the equipment manufacturers. The equipment manufacturers who are selling various equipments, from solar, DER, to transformers, to other type of equipments, to this utilities industry. And I wanted to give you a sense of how you could actually get involved. So these couple of slides will give you a sense. We do webinars, conferences. We have a conference coming up on March 27 in Phoenix. The regulators have invited us. We have a Global Smart City Conference on May 10th in Orlando. And we have various trainings that we offer at different locations globally. And like I said, the key catalogs that we are developing, we call them the EBC use case catalogs. We're developing for the utilities, the wholesale market, transportation sector, smart cities, and the equipment manufacturers. And the standardization effort is, there are 8 or 10 different working groups. Think of a working group where multiple people participate in a very collaborative way, trying to figure out what the use cases are, what the solutions are, what the standards are. So there's a lot of initiative underway in leveraging blockchain. So this is not something which is purely educational, but this is also very hands-on work, which is not very, not too much interesting because it requires a lot of work, but nevertheless, many organizations are involved in participating. And my company, my organization is also working on a few pilot projects for both the Department of Energy, private companies, IOUs, and actually some manufacturers as well. The accelerator program, like I said to you, provides a huge opportunity for many companies to ramp up quickly. There are some test use cases, and they can get some hands-on experience with the lab. All right, without any more delay, I want to go straight into now the introduction to blockchain. Now, what I'm not going to do is I'm not going to give you the information that you can find on Google. If you open up Google and see what blockchain is, everyone says it's a distributed ledger. However, I want to spend the next 10, 15 minutes to really provide an education of what actually blockchain is, beyond the hype, what it really means, and how it can be applied. Obviously, we've all heard about Bitcoin, right? We've heard about Bitcoin, what it does, but many of us have not heard about blockchain. Those who have heard about blockchain think that it's overly hyped, it's probably just a distributed ledger, or somebody would say it's a smart contract. Some people might say it's a trustless environment, and cryptocurrency, data mining, all of these things are what we've heard about blockchain. The question is, why should I care? And what would the regulators think about it when blockchain is deployed? Many organizations think that blockchain is like cryptocurrency, and it is associated with cryptocurrency. And some utilities say, I'm never going to use it because it's going to disintermediate me. And the utilities in India are saying that it's not our cup of tea. I don't think we need blockchain. I don't think the Indian market needs blockchain. That's what we've been hearing from various different markets and segments. I have interacted with many utilities besides the US and Canada. I've interacted with utilities in South America, Europe, China, Australia, and what we have discovered is that every country is in a different evolutionary path of adopting blockchain. The only common theme is that they are starting to care about it, and they believe that there is some value, but they don't know where to start. That's the common theme. So to start, what we have to really do is to really understand blockchain. So first of all, think of a blockchain like an iceberg. What we hear about is a Bitcoin, which is on the tip of the iceberg. But the real technology that drives the Bitcoin is, in fact, blockchain. So that is how you can think about blockchain as the underlying technology that drives this application called Bitcoin. Similarly, there could be many other applications like other type of cryptocurrencies. But that is not the only reason why you want to use blockchain. You can use blockchain for trading assets. You can use blockchain for tracking assets. You can use blockchain for security. So there are many different use cases that we can apply using blockchain. So blockchain necessarily does not need to have just a cryptocurrency. That is very interesting because now I'm saying that you don't need to actually have a cryptocurrency to use blockchain. That is in itself very interesting. To really understand blockchain, what I've done in the past is that you can actually see the evolution of blockchain, why it actually started. So I'm going to talk about why blockchain even started. What was the basis behind blockchain to really appreciate blockchain? If you remember in 2007, 2008, there was a huge problem in the US, which was the financial crisis, which led to a great recession globally. This financial crisis was very significant because there was a lot of trust that we all had in the US in many institutions like Goldman Sachs, Lehman Brothers. But what actually happened was that those organizations sold mortgages, and those mortgages were sold to people who could not afford those mortgages, if you can believe that. That happened in 2007, 2008, where it culminated into a disaster. And that was the time when people lost trust. Many of the people had retirement savings that went down the drain. So during that time when all of this trust was getting lost, in 2008, actually, in the August of 2008, there was something interesting happening. Bitcoin was actually born at that time. And believe it or not, the reason Bitcoin was born was to solve that trust problem. Yes, it was actually because they wanted to solve that trust problem. And the trust problem was that they didn't want to rely on financial institutions for their future. Completely a radical idea, right? That was when Bitcoin was born. So the question is, Bitcoin is a cryptocurrency that actually uses the blockchain technology to establish trust. So some people, I'm one of them, says that the blockchain is a trust machine. It's a technology that establishes trust, which is in itself very unique and different. Blockchain has a very interesting capability. Remember, I said blockchain is a technology and Bitcoin is the application. So blockchain, the technology, the reason it's very unique is because it has a way to establish trust in the machine. How is it even possible? It has a way to establish trust in the machine through a certain technology that can be used to not only manage the data and manage the transactions, but it also has a phenomenal new way to establish trust through the process called consensus, which is very, very unique actually. So think of a computer that we have been working for 30, 40, 50 years, where we store the data and we have business logic on top of the data. But all of a sudden, if we have a way to control the execution of that business logic so that we eliminate the need for interpretation of that information, then we have a mechanism to establish trust. And I'll talk a little bit more about it. Some of the capabilities in a blockchain, such as decentralized control, or the distributed ledger that is very famous for, or the immutability and the cryptography, etc., are the basic foundations of how trust is established through this mechanism called consensus. But let me just spend a little bit time about how that occurs. I want to take you back to the way the world is today. Today, if you look into our world of the computing world, it's very, very straightforward. We have computers, we have databases, and we write lines and lines of code in developing the business logic. And we call it an application, right? So whether you are a bank or a utility or an insurance company or a car company or a healthcare company, all the systems are centralized. Centralized means everything is centralized. You can have multiple databases, you can have multiple computers, but the execution is all centralized, right? So that's how the world works today. Everything is centralized. Look at Facebook, look at Google. They all control that same data. Google is not sharing their data with anybody. They control that data. Facebook controls your data. The insurance company controls your data. Your healthcare provider controls that data. That's called centralization. With blockchain, that paradigm actually changes. How does it change? The way it changes is that when you have this business logic or a database, with blockchain, they decided to distribute that across multiple companies or multiple nodes. You will say, what is a big deal in that? In this particular case, if you have a blockchain that's distributed across, let's say, 3 companies or 3 nodes, this is what is happening. The same data is scattered across 3 organizations or 10 organizations or million organizations, same data. Then you have a smart contract, which is the business logic that actually processes that data. We can all relate to that, right? But you would say, why is the smart contract distributed? What is the big deal? Why is it scattered? And I'll come to that in a second. But the fact is, a blockchain looks like what you see in front of you on the right side, which is the green color boxes of nodes, where a company is not in control of the entire data or the process. They're in control of the data and the process which is in front of them, which is with them. But the interesting thing is that they don't have control over it in the sense that they can use that for their own use, or they can manipulate that or monopolize that. So therefore, the control is decentralized. So if the control is decentralized, that becomes the basis for how trust is established. So step 1 is they decentralize the control. Even though the business logic is same across all the nodes, they have decentralized it so that company A or company B is not the sole proprietor of that data and the business logic. The next question is, how does that environment help establish trust, or how is it done? The mechanics of it. The answer is that there is one capability called consensus that allows the machine to establish trust. And I'm going to actually walk you through that through an example. Let's take an example where Andy is selling 3 widgets to Bob. So Bob now needs to pay, let's say, Andy, $3 for those 3 widgets. In a blockchain, we obviously know in a conventional application, we would write a Java application and make it work, right? Which will be under the control of company A, as one company, which is going to process the transaction. But in the blockchain world, this is how it works. A blockchain is created with a smart contract that says that the number of widgets sold and multiplied by the price is the amount value that is owed by person A to person B. So that is all coded in a smart contract. And when that is coded in a smart contract, the very first thing a simple blockchain with one node will do is that it'll digitally sign that transaction, which is the mechanism by which it is guaranteeing that transaction. The guarantee of a transaction is very important. That guarantee can be established through a digital signature. And this guarantee is established not just by company A, but it's established by a number of players who have agreed that this is how we need to establish trust, which means how to sign the transaction or how to agree on the transaction. So there is more than one company that has agreed. So company A basically does exactly what they all agreed to based upon the smart contract. Now, if there was another company, which is now the real value of blockchain, now think of the blockchain scattered across two companies or two systems. Now what happens is that the transaction, which was in company A's node, is propagated, the same transaction, to company B. So now company B knows that Andy sold 3 widgets to Bob at the rate of $1 per unit, and Bob owes $3 to Andy. That fact now is gone to the company B in the ledger of the company B. The company B basically takes this data, but it doesn't just take it and says, "Oh, thank you." It basically tries to verify it. Remember, trust but verify. It takes this data and it verifies it. Now remember, in a conventional world, this never occurs. We keep the data in one machine and that is the end of the story. But in a blockchain, that data gets re-verified with the second node. And it keeps that data in the second node in its ledger. And therefore, think of this as a distributed ledger. But remember, the control is also distributed, not just the data itself. Let's say there was another company that is also participating in this blockchain, or a node participating in a blockchain. It goes through the same process of validating this transaction and verifying this transaction. And that verification basically is one of the most key things that occurs. This verification is done by the node C. However, in order to really make the transaction valid, this is what happens. Think of it like Andy sold 3 widgets to Bob. Maybe there's another transaction that says, Kathy sold, 10 widgets to, Donald. That transaction also needs to be codified. So all of these transactions, TX, TY, TZ, all of them get propagated. At that moment in time, it's still not a done deal. This is what happens, which is the most valuable thing about blockchain. I repeat, the most valuable thing about blockchain is about to occur, which is somebody, which is called a leader, gets nominated to create a block. So somebody gets nominated to create a block. You would say, who is that somebody and who nominates it? Think of it like this. There is a smart contract in the blockchain that needs to identify an entity who is going to verify and create a block. So blockchain has 3 ways in which it does that. The most common way is called proof of work, which I'll talk about. A proof of work is a mechanism by which a leader is nominated, and I'll tell you how the leader is nominated because that is a very interesting thing. A leader gets nominated, and the leader basically uses the contract as a way to validate all these transactions. Andy sold 3 widgets to Bob, Kathy sold 12 widgets to Donald, etc., etc. They take all of that, they bundle it, and they create a block actually. And that block is called a block in the distributed ledger. And that block has a link to the previous block. It has a link to a hash, which means it is actually encrypted, is a timestamp. And all of that transaction, which is Andy sold 3 widgets and Kathy sold 12 widgets, all of that information is captured in a block, in a box, and it's memorialized. It's kept forever. It cannot be broken. It cannot be changed. It cannot be modified. The reason it cannot be modified is because the creator, the leader, puts his or her private key through the public private key encryption model on the block. So this block is unchangeable. The moment somebody tampers with this block, it gets invalidated because of the private key of the creator, the leader who created the block. And when this block, over time, the previous one connects to the next one connects to the next one, and over days, weeks, months, the chain continues. And that's why they call it the blockchain, because it's a chain of blocks. And the blocks are created by the leader, and the leader is nominated through consensus. I hope this is all making sense. So how is the trust and consensus established? Remember I said blockchain was a trust machine. I didn't say it's a distributed ledger or this and that. I'm giving you a sense of what blockchain is. It lets you establish trust, actually. So there are three ways in which it's done. One most common way is the proof of work. Remember somebody was to create the block? This is how it works. All of the folks who are interested in establishing trust, these are called the data miners, for example, that you've heard about. They are given a mathematical puzzle to solve. They say, hey, will you solve this puzzle? Hey, will you solve this puzzle? Hey, will you solve this puzzle? And all these people, 10, 20, 30, 100, 1,000 of these people solve that puzzle. So they set up big machines, big computer systems, big data centers to solve this puzzle. And the puzzle, once it's solved, makes them the leader. And that leader now has the computing capacity to process these transactions in the blockchain and create that block. So the consensus is established by the leader who is nominated based upon a mathematical puzzle. And the reason people believe that data mining takes a lot of energy and time is because it takes a lot of computing to solve the mathematical puzzle. In fact, the power consumption is almost the consumption of Denmark in a year. If that is the level of consumption of power. Obviously, there are remedies to cure that, but I want to give you a sense of how blockchain works. There's a democratic way to establish trust on a public blockchain. However, for the utility industry, for the energy industry, for the banking industry, for insurance industry, there are less difficult ways of establishing trust. One is called a proof of stake. So who is this proof of stake and who are these people? Think of it like in a blockchain, you have 10 utilities participating in a transaction. You have a manufacturing organization that has 2 or 3 important players and a number of suppliers and a number of customers. It is a small group of companies who can say, we are going to establish trust. And those are called the proof of stake stakeholders. So those stakeholders are the nominees of establishing trust or the consensus. So this is a very small group. It doesn't need to be hundreds and thousands of companies and organizations. It could be 3 companies or 4 companies or 5 companies. Think of it like a small nexus of companies, and a few of them have been nominated to establish trust. Similarly, the stake, they have to have a stake in the transaction. Somebody has 30% stake, somebody has 20% stake. So the stake determines that. And then the third one, which is also very common, is the proof of authority. In a proof of authority, it's not what you own on the blockchain itself, but it's a few people and leaders that we would like them to be in charge. Like, for example, in a utility industry, you want your local utility probably to control some of the data, and maybe your neighboring utility or maybe some other type of an entity that you believe in trust can establish trust. So the proof of authority is a model where you have a smaller number of people who are in charge of establishing trust. So that mechanism of establishing trust is called consensus. And there are 3 techniques available: proof of work, proof of stake, and proof of authority, which allows us to establish trust, basically. So now let's talk about blockchain for the power industry. We all know that our industry is going through a transformation. There's a huge digitization that has been occurring, and many of us have been working with smart grid for a number of years now with the new deployment of AMI, AMR. and now the IoTs and the IT/OT integration. There's a lot of activity in the distribution automation. So needless to say, we are creating a lot of data, and there's a huge effort in digitization of our industry. There's one more thing happening. Our industry is getting a little bit decentralized. This is totally independent of the blockchain, as opposed to the large power plants that we had, at least nowadays, at least in the US and the Canadian market. We are finding the distributed assets, distributed energy resources, which are getting integrated. Many of the regulated or vertically aligned utilities are now starting to embrace DER integration, as opposed to electricity going one way from generation to transmission to distribution to a consumer. That's how the world has worked for the last 150 years, right? As opposed to one direction, all of a sudden seeing electricity move the other side. A residence which has a solar, on their rooftop is pumping energy back into the grid. And US has certain regulations like feed-in tariff that requires the utilities to buy power. So all of a sudden, our electricity is going two-way. As opposed to a customer of a utility company in a particular address, all of a sudden, the customer is mobile. He or she is driving his or her car, electric vehicle, and charging it on the road. So not only is the electricity industry changing, but it's changing rapidly, and it's changing very fast, actually. We're also finding a very democratized way from monopolies to distributed environment happening, because customers are demanding green energy. So there is a demand now that's coming from the consumers, which is making us change the way we do business. Obviously, the data and security is paramount. The US and the Canadian market spent billions of dollars in managing and beefing up the security, actually. And they're trying to harness the data that they've collected and making sure that they can manage it. There's a huge problem that requires attention. One of the biggest vulnerabilities in this industry, where there is a huge opportunity for IEEMA members, I would say, is that there is a lot of problems on the edge of the grid, which is causing a lot of vulnerabilities. And these vulnerabilities of security are the softest area of where hacking can occur. And utilities do not have control behind the meter. So a combination of the grid edge and behind the meters has created tremendous opportunities for equipment manufacturers to create solutions and provide hardware and software solutions to manage that. Then we have many technical challenges to maintain the grid reliability, including the ability to integrate the wholesale market with the distribution utility market through the concept of transactive energy. And we know that utilities are repositioning themselves in developing new business models. They want to build business models that includes not just consumers as consumers, but consumers as prosumers, which means they can actually produce electricity as well. And they are looking to create new regulatory policies. We are working with the state of Arizona, for example, that has opened up a docket on blockchain, and they want to make sure there is proper regulatory ecosystem in place to ensure that blockchain is embraced by the Arizona utilities. Similar sentiment is happening in Wyoming, Rhode Island, Florida, Texas, and other different states. And I've also seen the same thing happen in Ottawa, New Brunswick, Prince Edward Island, and many other provinces in Canada as well. And obviously, there's a lot of that working in Europe as well. Then the last but not the least, our customers are sort of changing. They are becoming more demanding. They are always connected. They've got cell phones in their hands, and they want to be able to manage their energy and control their experience and reduce their cost, and they're very demanding. They are expecting things in a heartbeat. People order things from the Flipkarts and the Amazons, and they receive them in 1 or 2 or 3 days. People are expecting very similar experience with their energy consumption. So the customer expectations are changing tremendously. Blockchain is a tool that can actually provide a great value for this transformation, both on the digitization side, decentralization side, democratization side, and specifically around the data, where there is a tremendous opportunity. It can help you unlock the data and achieve a greater degree of cybersecurity. Tremendous opportunity for new products and technologies. It can allow you to solve problems much more economically. Blockchain can also allow you to put the right foundation to create new business models for the utility of the future. And blockchain is a very good technology by engaging customers in offering customer applications. So remember, I didn't talk about cryptocurrency here because cryptocurrency just happens to be the one use case that people know about. But blockchain as a technology can actually help us go through this transformation and create new products, new widgets, new technologies. And I'll talk about a few of those specific use cases for the IEEMA members. But in terms of the utility use cases, there are use cases which are, I'm going to go through a few of them so you have an appreciation for these type of use cases. One type of use cases are the trading of energy, trading of any asset. It's not just a peer-to-peer, but it's also how utilities can participate in the energy trading by bringing in those prosumers and consumers. You can also use blockchain for grid management, actually, and transactive energy, which means you can actually integrate your wholesale market with the distribution utility market in a way that it has not occurred before. You can actually empower your consumers by giving them choices on their mobile phones. And on the back end, you can entire delivery model. You can also enable your consumers with an Airbnb type of a model, believe it or not, that is also coming down the pike, which means EV charging. You can charge your EV anywhere, and you can pay to your local utility based upon a decentralized model. And the DER integration is one of the biggest assets, actually, one of the biggest problems in the US market and the Canadian market. Integration of DER assets, not just the integration from a technology perspective, but integration based upon one more key variable, which touches the boardroom, which is revenue. The revenue of the utilities is depleting because the DER assets, when they are integrated by commercial companies, can create a revenue model for IEEMA. It can create a revenue model for manufacturers, and it can create a revenue model for equipment makers and service providers, but it is reducing the revenue of the utilities. So there's a lot of activity going on in trying to figure out how do we benefit from a DER integration by working with equipment manufacturers, utilities, and prosumers. Emission tracking, energy data management are a few of the cases where we are seeing a lot of traction. My organization is working on one major project for solar REC accounting. The state of Florida is looking, for example, to measure and track their solar RECs, and they are able to use that solar REC to retire. First, they will retire these solar RECs, and they will use this solar REC as a way to enhance their renewable targets of about 40% in about, I think, 10 years. Some people think that we want to start small. And one of the ways in which a blockchain can be used in a very small way is through energy data management. And I've seen a few solutions which are underway right now. Regulators in every country and every state think differently and have a different meaning to blockchain. But there are many use cases that actually can benefit regulators, and there are many use cases that regulators can use to work with the utilities and the equipment manufacturers. There's a huge angle of certification, quality control, transparency that the regulators would love actually. And I would encourage IEEMA members to look into how you can use blockchain to create that value proposition for your customers like the utilities and also the regulators, and how you basically certify your equipment. There's a huge opportunity there. The security, like I said, is a never-ending game, and blockchain is a perfect technology that allows you to protect such as digital assets like data, and it can also make it hacking proof or pilfer proof. So one hacker cannot steal records such as 100 plus million records from Equifax, or 100 plus million records from TJ Maxx, and millions of records from many other organizations we hear about almost on a weekly basis. So blockchain can actually help you solve these problems very effectively without even using cryptocurrency. So I want to talk, I have one slide for equipment manufacturers. And we've talked about a few use cases that power equipment manufacturers can benefit from. Again, these are just high-level use cases, but let me just go through them. Equipment manufacturers can gain competitive advantage over both domestic and foreign competitors because it's a very competitive market, and any edge one can get will be beneficial. So blockchain can provide a level of confidence, traceability, so that you're able to project that quality to your customers. You can also improve your supply chain for tracking parts, for recognizing issues within the supply chain, and streamlining that industry transaction. You can also maintain the test data related to quality and provide a level of transparency to the utilities and other customers. And I know that for sure because I did some work at Crompton Greaves in Mumbai a long time ago, and those huge transformers required significant level of quality control. And I've seen over the years that whether it's that very large transformer or a small piece of CVR, conservation voltage regulatory equipment, which sits on the feeder line, whether it costs millions of dollars or $10, there is a level of quality assurance that our customers need that actually can be improved using blockchain. For guaranteeing our customers that you're using authentic and genuine parts, by actually creating a digital ID to authenticate the origin of these parts or the ingredients that make up the equipment. You can also reduce your liability, which is related to moving of the parts and components from one place to the other. Specifically, if the equipment is used or handled or tampered with or damaged or gets lost, all of that can be tracked using blockchain. And remember, you can do it through a conventional computer system also, but using blockchain provides a level of authenticity and transparency and confidence that your customers will come to appreciate. You can also gain a competitive advantage in an export situation, which I can talk about. There's a need. There are a few industries, the food industry, and obviously many of the manufacturing industries and the supply chain, where we need to provide a tamper-proof chain of custody of these assets. That could be one way to guarantee that that it's tamper-proof and hacking-proof, and you can also provide accessibility and the records for auditors for the purpose of compliance. So all of that, and of course more, are certain ways in which you can start to leverage blockchain in a way that it is sort of meaningful And you don't have to big, you can start small. If you look into the customers who buy these equipments, which are the utilities, for example, they can use blockchain to manage their assets, for tracking these assets, tracking the life cycle of these assets. And they can do proactive asset management. We've all heard about that. But blockchain is a way to have independent measurement and verification. I think without that, they're relying on the paper transactions and conventional computer reports, which are, almost as trustworthy as the person delivering it. But if you embed it into the blockchain, then there is a guarantee of validity, and that could really be beneficial in many areas. And the customers can actually get a better level of service using blockchain by deploying blockchain to deliver a new next generation of customer experience. And last but not the least, you can offer proactive repairing and parts replacement before equipment breaks down. And although all of this is possible through a conventional computer, leveraging the blockchain-based technology will give you the opportunity to prove and provide transparency and provide a genuine authenticity to your products and technologies, and you will be able to relate to your customers better with that type of credibility. So that is the application of blockchain, and I want to thank you once again for your time. And if you have any questions or you have anything after this webinar you want to talk about, you can always send us an email. So how do I take questions, Vikram?
You can stop.
I take questions?
You just stop the sharing. We'll ask our friends in the room if they have any questions.
So,
okay.
Vikram, can I start the question?
Yeah, of course, Subbu.
Thank you, Tony. Very good evening to you. This is Subbu from Mumbai. You will have to pardon me if my question is... Hello?
Yes,
Subbu,
yeah, so I said you please pardon me if the question is a little bizarre because this is the first glimpse of blockchain that I got. Thank you very much for the 3-widget story that helped me to understand. You see, from the perspective of power sector, where the stakeholders are equipment manufacturers, the utilities, the consumers/prosumers, and the regulators. Now, all the use cases that you said, that the 12 use cases for utilities and 13 use cases for the manufacturers, to my mind, when I read, they are largely achieved by the current smart grid automation technologies, digitalization, the cloud computing, and artificial intelligence. So what I am failing to comprehend is, what is the delta advantage this blockchain is creating for any of these stakeholders? This is still not clear to my mind.
Subbu, definitely. I think the objective of today's webinar is to give you a little bit of an insight into blockchain as a technology. Think of this as a next generation of distributed computing technology that works with your conventional existing capabilities like the cloud and the IoT. But let me answer your question specifically. Using conventional technologies like the cloud computing and the IoT and the AI, we do what we do, and there is no difference. What I'm saying is that most of these solutions are developed using some technology. If you look into your distributed computing applications or a smart grid application, let's talk about the AMI/AMR, for example. You are picking data from a smart meter. You are pushing it into an MDM, meter data management. You are using that data to run analytics on it. And that data can then feed into your outage management system, or that data can feed into your customer information system, or that data can be used with the IT/OT integration, right? Let's say that's the use case, because we have to deal with this one step at a time. In this particular use case of smart grid, you are producing a lot of data. You are connecting to a lot of IoT devices or smart meters, and you are using a lot of the data to process this data and run analytics. And if you are really too much forward thinking, you would run analytics on it to do predictive modeling and maybe do provide a way to predict where the failure could occur for proactive outage management. Now, in this particular smart grid scenario, which I've actually described based upon some use cases that I worked on, you would say, where do I use blockchain, right? One of the ways in which you can use blockchain would be to, when you pull the data from the IoT devices or smart meters into the MDM, that data could actually sit, the transactional data could sit in the blockchain itself. That could be one way to do it, because now that data is guaranteed to have a security on it. That data could also be pushed into other systems for analytics, for example. That you can use the AI technology sits on top of that. But in this particular transaction where the data is within the organization, blockchain is only serving a small purpose because it is keeping the data intact, but it is not distributing it in multiple locations. So in this particular case, the use case of blockchain would be for data protection and data management. And you can also do one more thing. The data that is created by the consumers, that data technically in this case is owned by the utility. But if you use blockchain, you can empower your customers to own that data. So the energy management data could be owned by the customer. They can control how much of the data is available. Because in the US and the Canadian market, one of the biggest issues that people have is that the AMI, AMR data gives too much information about a person's privacy, and they don't like that. That is one of the reasons why many people are not interested in smart meters. In fact, there have been legal cases against utilities by people who have deployed smart meters. So one of the ways in which you can neutralize that issue is by empowering the consumers with that energy data, and you can give them control of how that data can be used purposefully, as opposed to that data going to the utility and the utility basically making use of it. You can also think about the third use case where you can have a way to manage the assets. So the asset that you have right now, such as the utility meter or other assets, that asset can be tracked. Its functioning can be tracked. And that tracking of the asset can allow you to proactively manage that asset. So by using blockchain, once we go through some of these use cases one by one, we will see that blockchain can provide, in some cases, a very small incremental value. In some other use cases, it'll provide a significant value. One more thing I want to talk about is the behind-the-meter security issue. One of the biggest risks that the utilities face is that behind-the-meter risk of security. Using blockchain, you can actually guarantee that you are able to airtight that edge environment so that there is less chance for data pilfering and hacking behind the meter. So these are 3 or 4 use cases where I believe there is incremental value, and also in some cases there is significant value. Hopefully that sort of gives you a sense of the additional value blockchain can offer.
Thank you very much. One last question. After that, I'll mute off completely. For we IEEMA members who are equipment manufacturers, what is the radical value, that use case that you can think of?
You know, I basically had this as a list of things that it's very difficult to find a silver bullet or a killer app. But I think the equipment manufacturers can start small by doing a few things. I think one thing is very, very internal, which is to improve the supply chain, tracking the parts, recognizing issues, and also around testing of the equipment and providing transparency to customers. Quality control is becoming a very huge thing in the utility industry, in the oil and gas industry. It is one of the biggest things. Every step of the way, there is a quality control and there is a need of transparency. So if you can think of one killer application, you should think about quality, certification, tracking, and providing authenticity to your customers using blockchain.
So Tony, I have got one question. My name is Sunil.
Yes.
No. Can I ask question, please? No.
Yes, please. Go ahead.
Fundamental benefits. For example, if you're running a conventional system and if we implement blockchain, how much is the investment difference if I'm putting a conventional supply chain management and compared to if I implement blockchain, how much extra capital investment or software investment will be there?
That's a good question, actually, and I think I get that question a lot. At the moment, I'm not really sure about the capital investment. It all depends upon the use case and your purpose for that application.
For example, if I think supply chain and this particular system, how much will be typical difference in multiples?
Let me try to give you the right answer. A manufacturer that buys SAP, for example, can spend millions and millions and millions of dollars, right? It could be anywhere from $1,000 a month to a $50 million project. Let's say that's using a conventional technology such as SAP or Oracle ERP. I'm not suggesting that you replace that. I think the way I see it is that you can take one use case, let's say for supply chain management, one use case to manage your customer's customer and to integrate your customer's customer and your supplier's supplier. Think of it like that's one of the very significant use cases that many manufacturers are interested in, right? And to manage the internal supply chain. There is definitely an upfront cost, probably a little bit more than your conventional, Java application. And the reason for that is because this is a new technology, so you don't find too many people on the street who know this. However, they have built a lot of the capability on Amazon AWS, and you can actually use a lot of that out of the box. But in terms of the cost, it's a little bit higher at the moment compared to your conventional Java technologies. I cannot assert and say, is it 2 times more or 3 times more, but it's definitely more. But one of the benefits from that would be that investment would result in maybe greater revenue for you. It'll reduce your risk and it'll reduce your operational cost in the long term. That's sort of the way this model is being projected and has the potential for.
Thank you.
Sure.
Any question?
Tony, I have a question. Globally, as per the trends available, in which domain or sector this blockchain technology is being deployed the maximum as of date? For example, is it in manufacturing sector or R&D or logistics? Which sector it is deployed the most, and where it could make sense accordingly for?
Yeah, I think the sector where it's deployed the most is where the technology provides the most competitive advantage, and that is the fintech industry, the financial industry. The financial industry cares about millisecond transactions and security because they're protecting digital asset as money as a digital asset. So blockchain has been used in a maximum way in the financial sector, specifically in the banking industry as of now. I think after that, there is a flat, the hierarchy is fairly flat. Fintech is on the top, and then you have a lot of other industries which are starting to dabble with it. Insurance industry is one, logistics industry is another one. There's a lot of talk between IBM and Merck's project, but what you hear on Google is not fact. because I'm connected to the logistics industry. So I can tell you that after the fintech, some of these industries like the logistics, supply chain, and now the energy, oil and gas is pretty high. But these are all sort of 6 months, 9 months apart in terms of their adoption of blockchain. Fintech being on the top.
What is your take, keeping in mind that these data centers which create these coordinators or leaders consume a hell of a lot of energy? You gave one example equivalent to the power consumption of Denmark. Do you think it is sustainable?
Say again, the last part?
Is it sustainable?
It is not sustainable to me, because even though the model is democratic, we know the benefits of a democracy, but we also know that if it's not used well, it collapses. So the POW is the only perfect solution to have a democratic consensus. However, it is not sustainable from an energy consumption perspective. So what's happening in the US market is as follows. The Pacific Northwest, which is Oregon and Washington and all those areas, Washington State, I mean, in the Pacific Northwest, the price of electricity is cheapest, lowest. So most of the data miners are actually going there to set up their shop. One of the things that is happening is that the regulators are asking those data miners to deploy renewables so that 1/3 of the energy comes from renewables, the solar and the wind, which basically reduces the impact on the electrical grid. So your speculation is right. To me, it's not sustainable, but if you can complement that with renewable, it has the potential for some sustainability. Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Sure.
I have a question. So from the perspective of the equipment manufacturers, you said that one value add is definitely the internal processing, including the SCM and other such quality data testing. But from a perspective of partnership with the utilities and the equipment manufacturers, so are there any use cases where we are trying to make a model where the equipment manufacturers and the utilities can partner together to cater to the value chain?
Yeah, that's a very good question, actually. And if you look into some of the use cases that I had articulated, now remember, we are only having some early use case discussions with some of the manufacturers of the solar equipment, the battery storage. Like, for example, Tesla is one of the companies that we have worked with. If you look into these manufacturers of equipment, I think they have a need to establish trust with their customers, who are the utilities. And what they are able to do is they are able to provide measurement and verification of data and provide a level of proactive asset management. So if you can build a relationship with the utility where the asset is sold and serviced and all of that is provisioned through a blockchain, yes, it can be done through a conventional Java application or a .NET application, but with a blockchain centric application, there is a next generation of trust and verification that can be established. And you can use blockchain as the underlying technology to establish that trust, to establish a MNV system, and to provide proactive asset management. And I think those type of services will be very, very beneficial to the utilities, because utilities do care about proactive asset management, because the cost of proactive asset management is much lower than otherwise. So you can also offer condition-based asset management. So there are certain things you can do to build a stronger relationship with your customers.
We lost you, Tony. Can you repeat the answer?
Yes. What I'm saying is that in order for the equipment manufacturers to establish trust and credibility with their customers, you can use blockchain as a way to provide a level of independence, a level of measurement and verification. You can also provide a blockchain as a way to manage the assets. You can do asset tracking. You can do asset lifecycle management. You can also provide a way in which they can do parts procurement. And using blockchain gives you that level of authenticity, level of confidence, and a mutual sort of higher degree of relationship with your customers. Because the data is protected, the mechanism of transaction are protected, the data is verifiable. If you certify a product or an application using blockchain, that information is reliable, it's certifiable. If you say that you've used a certain part, if you use certain parts, that origin of the part is very important for your customers to get verification that that part genuinely came from that source. So you can use blockchain as a way to establish that trust, improve quality, and create and offer a level of compliance that has not been seen before.
Okay.
Yes, sir. So
this is all without any cryptocurrency.
So I had a question about cryptocurrency. Recently, we had a case where the owner of the cryptocurrency died. So the password was protected by him and the entire cryptocurrency went down the drain. So a similar situation, by decentralizing and providing a huge security mechanism, can also lead to the assets going down via the customers when we provide the control to the customers for the assets. So could this such problem arise when we talk about blockchain in the same manner? And we also know that cryptocurrency is coming up and it might be a part of the power grid when we're talking about all the transactions might happen in cryptocurrency. So could there be some problem in that part also?
Well, a cryptocurrency is a double-edged sword. A cryptocurrency can be a great asset to use as a monetary asset to buy and sell. And again, if it's so highly protected and you lose it, then you lose it. It's like, you go to Yahoo and you enter your username and password, or you go to Facebook, you put your username and password and you lost it, and there's no way to recover it. Then you don't have any other way to get to it if you lost all contact and lost all devices. So blockchain is also heavily protected. If you lose your password, you lose your password. There are certain ways to recover certain things like that, but the protection is a little bit more stronger. So yeah, there are some positives and there are some negatives. But I think every technology, every solution will have some negatives. In fact, a cryptocurrency and hacking of the digital wallets is actually, interestingly, happened at the edge of the blockchain, in the wallet itself. But there has been very little documented case of data being stolen or data being hacked in the core of the blockchain. Unlike any other industries that we see today where data was stolen from Equifax, data was stolen from Yahoo, data was stolen directly from all these different organizations. The only problems you're witnessing in blockchain are that somebody lost their wallet or somebody lost their password, which are fairly inane or can be managed through some remedies, basically.
Okay.
Hi, Venkat.
नीचे आ रहा हूँ, JP टेक्नोलॉजी बिल्डिंग में आ रहा हूँ.
Good. Hello, Tony.
Venkat, please, can you speak? I'm getting some noise. Go ahead. Sorry, I can't hear you.
I think he has put one question in the text also. What is it written?
Okay,
What is suggested? What is manufacturing organization who wish
can you hear us? Hello?
equipment manufacturing? Do they need to hire an IT company or tie up with an IT company just like SAP?
You can also post a message on the Zoom chat. I can read that if that helps.
Yeah,
Everybody
I
can
think,
see that as well.
yes, I think you could answer that.
You want me to answer the question which was said from Deepak Patni?
Yeah.
Okay. So Deepak is saying that what is suggested as the starting point for manufacturing organizations who wish to adopt blockchain for the equipment manufacturing? Do they need to hire an IT person or tie up with an IT company just like SAP? Okay. I think to get started with blockchain, you can obviously use certain open source blockchain and use that as a starting point. What we have done in the Energy Blockchain Consortium is that we've provided some direction as to how utility companies and manufacturing companies and even regulators can use blockchain. We've created like a lab, We've created a lab with R3, IOTA, Hyperledger, and some of these products in our lab. And we give them username, password, so they can actually try it, and they can try, Hello World application. So I think one of the best ways to start using blockchain is to be part of a group. Some of you can get together, be part of a group, and then see if you can get somebody. You can try a few of these technologies. In our case, our members are able to come into our lab virtually. They can come into a lab, on the cloud, and they can try R3 or IOTA or Hyperledger or a few others, and then they can try it. That's the best way to do it. Just try it and use it. Don't just hire a company and start making an application. First, try to deal with it in a very small way, and then try to see what is a use case you can use. What is the most compelling problem that you can solve? Think of it like that. Think of it like what problem can be the most valuable for you to increase your relationship with your customer or to improve the quality of your equipment or a product. Start with that and then try to see which blockchain would be the right fit. And I think if you guys need any help, then you can certainly send us an email or send me an email, and we can try to get you more information or give you pointers. Anything else? Any other question?
Any other question?
Hi, Tony. Hello.
Yes, go ahead.
Hi, Tony. Tony, this is Sumit from Panasonic, and I have this, as I understand from this blockchain concept, it's more of a contract executing method.
It's more of a
contract execution. A contract execution.
Okay.
So, what my proposition, what I am little bit I would like to understand is set in a distribution, basically a discom, where a lot of prosumers are coming up. There is actually a chance where real-time trading could also be an option between prosumer and consumer immediate.
Yeah, that is a very good use case. That is one of the most prevalent use cases in the US market, because remember, blockchain is in its early stages of adoption, and one of the use cases is buying and selling of an asset. Like you buy something and somebody sells something, and in the example I gave you, Andy sold 3 widgets to Bob. It was a trading application. So you're right.
Yes.
The trading application is one of the early use cases for blockchain.
But then the only point I would like to understand is the whole important block in this whole trading mechanism is the smart meter.
It's what you say is smart meter the block? Is that the question?
No.
Yeah. I just want to know. No, not the block. I feel in the whole blockchain concept, the data from the meter is going to be very crucial.
Yeah. Okay, I'm not disputing that. The data from the meter is very crucial. I agree with that. So what's your question?
So will it use the same infrastructure which the meter has already been put to use, or will it require a separate infrastructure altogether?
Okay, so that's the example that I gave when I think Subbu or I think Sunil asked that question about how can this be used in the existing smart grid ecosystem.
Yeah.
And I gave the answer that you will have to augment your existing infrastructure with some blockchain technology, but it's used in complementary. It's used in complement to the existing infrastructure. So I'll give you a very specific example. We are working on a project where the data is being stored in the MDM itself. So you continue to keep the data in the MDM. However, you can create an aggregated transaction and keep that in the blockchain to memorialize the transaction source and the genesis. So you keep the bulk of the data in your traditional ecosystem, but you can use the aggregated data with some of the genesis of the data with timestamp in the blockchain, and you can anonymize the data in your MDM, and that way the data in the blockchain can provide a level of control to the consumers. So there are ways in which you can complement your existing infrastructure with blockchain to get more value from it.
Great. So I think this has been really very interesting, Tony. It has opened new ideas for everybody. One thing is very clear that blockchain, in my view, will find application whenever there is transaction across different entities, and those transactions could be either like financial transaction or energy or like a real hardcore electrical equipment. And whenever there is a matter of trust, which is of critical importance, blockchain will be a very useful application to look at. And I think, at least for me, this has been the takeaway, and there is a good future. What we have to look for is the application which will be useful for the customers who are willing to pay for this new application. And on behalf of everybody here, if nobody else has any more comment or question, you want to say something? Okay. I would like to thank you so much, Tony. This has been really great. You have explained everything in a very good. First is the diction. Your English has been understood by everybody. You know, sometimes people from USA speak and we take time to understand what was the topic. But today, at least, you have scored 10 on 10 on diction, on content. And the content has also been very, very nicely and slowly explained so that we have caught on what was the idea. And if you allow, we will use this recording. We could use it in print, in our print journal, the IEEMA journal, which will send to all our members. If it is okay with you, we can, whatever has been your presentation and the question answers, they can be a part of the journal. I hope that is okay with you, with your name and your organization's credentials.
Yes, Vikram. That would be perfectly fine. That would be perfectly fine. And I want to reciprocate to you for giving us the opportunity, Vikram, to present this to the IEEMA members. I really enjoyed it. And if you have any questions, feel free to send it to us. We'll be very happy to answer them. And yes, you can have it in the publication, Vikram.
Okay, thank you. And I will also request DG to look at the possibility of signing a MOU with your body, the blockchain consortium, to mutually exchange and see what best we can do for this technology for our members.
Sure, we'll be in touch with Tony and discuss this.
Yeah. Good. So if there are no more further questions, we will not stand between you and your breakfast.
Yeah.
No?
Thank you, Vikram. Thank you, everyone. It was a pleasure to meet with all of you.
Thank you.
And I want to thank you for your time and have a great evening and good night.
Thank you.
Thank you. Good night. Thank you so much.
I think we should do more of these webinars.